For 30 years, Johnny Carson brought America's biggest stars into living rooms across the country. Every night at 11:30, millions of Americans would settle into their couches, knowing that Carson would deliver exactly what they needed: a perfect blend of celebrity glamour, sharp wit, and genuine warmth that no other host could replicate. The Tonight Show under Carson wasn't just a talk show, it was an American institution. Presidents sought his approval, movie stars considered an appearance essential, and comedians knew that a successful Carson spot could launch a career overnight. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Carson's smile often disappeared. The man who seemed so effortlessly charming on screen was, according to those who knew him best, a far more complex and sometimes ruthless figure behind the scenes. Johnny was the ultimate professional on camera, revealed a former Tonight Show producer who worked with Carson for over 15 years. But the minute we cut to commercial, the warmth would drain from his eyes, and you'd see the calculating mind behind the entertainer. According to those closest to him, America's favorite host kept a mental blacklist of guests he considered unworthy of ever returning to his stage. People who had crossed lines Carson considered unforgivable. Most shocking were the crown princess of comedy, who committed what Carson called the ultimate act of treason, and the legendary singer whose backstage cruelty sealed his fate forever. But first, we need to understand why the first name on Carson's blacklist, a woman he once loved like a daughter, earned a lifetime ban with a single phone call. 1. Joan Rivers. The crown princess who committed treason. Joan Rivers had been more than just a guest on The Tonight Show, she was practically family. From her very first appearance in 1965, when a nervous young comedian from Brooklyn sat across from Carson and made him laugh so hard he slapped his desk, Rivers had been Johnny's protégé, his favorite, his chosen successor. Over 2 decades she appeared on the show more than any other female comedian, and Carson trusted her so completely that she became his permanent guest host, the only person he allowed to sit behind his sacred desk when he took a night off. Joan was the daughter Johnny never had, recalled a longtime Tonight Show writer who worked closely with both of them. He mentored her, promoted her, gave her a platform when no one else in television would take a chance on a female comedian. Their chemistry was genuine. It wasn't an act. He truly adored her. Behind the scenes, their relationship extended far beyond the studio. Carson would call Rivers for advice, invite her to private dinners, and defend her against network executives who questioned whether a woman could carry comedy segments. He fought for her repeatedly, using his considerable influence to ensure she received opportunities that were routinely denied to female performers in that era. But in 1986, everything shattered with a single phone call that never came. Rivers had been secretly negotiating with the fledgling Fox network to launch her own late-night talk show, a direct competitor to Carson's Tonight Show. When the deal was finalized, Carson learned about it not from Joan herself, but from the trade papers. She had never consulted him, never warned him, never even had the courtesy to pick up the phone. Johnny called her the moment he found out, revealed a former Tonight Show producer who was present in Carson's office that day. He was eerily calm, which was always more frightening than anger with Johnny. He simply asked her, "Is it true?" When she confirmed it, there was this terrible silence. Then he said, "I thought we were friends, Joan. Friends don't do this." And he hung up. That was the last time they ever spoke. The betrayal cut Carson deeper than any professional rivalry could explain. According to those in his inner circle, it wasn't the competition that wounded him, it was the deception. Carson had made careers and destroyed them with equal ease, but he operated by a code. You looked a man in the eye and told him the truth, especially if that man had given you everything. Johnny never forgot and never forgave, noted a director who worked in the control room during Rivers' era on the show. For 17 years, her name was essentially forbidden in the building. New staff members were quietly warned, "Don't mention Joan Rivers around Johnny." It was as if she had never existed in the Tonight Show universe. Rivers' Fox show was canceled after just 8 months. In the decades that followed, she rebuilt her career through sheer determination, but the wound never healed on either side. When Carson died in January 2005, Rivers told friends she wept for days, not just for the man she'd lost, but for the reconciliation that would never come. In one of her final interviews before her own death in 2014, Rivers admitted with visible pain, "Not a day goes by that I don't think about Johnny. He gave me everything, and I handled it all wrong." 2. Frank Sinatra. The charming bully Carson couldn't stand. Frank Sinatra was by almost any measure the most powerful entertainer in American history. His voice could fill stadiums, his name could sell out any venue in the world, and his connections, both in Hollywood and in far more shadowy circles, made him a figure that most people in the entertainment industry treated with a mixture of admiration and genuine fear. When Sinatra walked into a room, the atmosphere changed. People stood straighter, laughed louder at his jokes, and carefully avoided saying anything that might provoke his legendary temper. Carson, who had grown up idolizing Sinatra's music in Nebraska, initially welcomed the singer onto The Tonight Show with genuine reverence. In the early years, their on-camera interactions had a warmth that audiences loved. Two titans of entertainment sharing stories and trading jokes like old pals at a cocktail party. But behind the scenes, a very different dynamic was taking shape. Sinatra treated The Tonight Show staff the way he treated most people who couldn't advance his career with casual contempt. According to multiple former employees, he would snap his fingers at production assistants, bark orders at stagehands, and dismiss anyone below a certain status as beneath his notice. Sinatra walked into our studio like he owned the building, recalled a camera operator who worked several of his appearances. He didn't ask for things, he demanded them. And if something wasn't exactly the way he wanted it, he would unleash a tirade that would make a sailor blush. The younger staff members were genuinely terrified of him. The breaking point came during a taping in the early 1970s when Sinatra turned his fury on Ed McMahon, Carson's beloved sidekick and closest friend in the television world. According to witnesses, Sinatra publicly humiliated McMahon during a pre-show rehearsal, mocking his role on the show and calling him degrading names in front of the entire crew. McMahon, a decorated Marine combat veteran, absorbed the insults with quiet dignity, but the damage was done. Carson was informed within minutes. A stagehand who witnessed the aftermath described the scene. "Johnny's face went completely white when he heard what Sinatra had said to Ed. I'd never seen him that angry. He didn't yell, Johnny never yelled. He just went very, very quiet, which was infinitely worse. He said, if he didn't sing, he'd be a mob enforcer, and sometimes I think he was both." That one sentence told you everything about how Johnny saw Sinatra from that moment on. After that incident, Sinatra's appearances on The Tonight Show became increasingly rare. Carson never publicly explained the distance, maintaining his characteristic professionalism whenever Sinatra's name came up in conversation. But privately, according to those closest to him, Carson had rendered his verdict. "Too much trouble for what we get," he told his producer flatly. Even during Sinatra's highly publicized retirement and comeback tours in the 1970s, Carson showed no interest in extending a special invitation. The king of late night had quietly closed his door on the chairman of the board. 3. Chevy Chase. The pretender who thought he could be Carson, Chevy Chase had burst onto the American consciousness in 1975 as the original anchor of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, a performance so magnetic that it made him the show's first breakout star. His pratfalls, his deadpan delivery, and his famous catchphrase, "I'm Chevy Chase," and you're not, turned him into an overnight sensation. Hollywood came calling almost immediately, and Chase left SNL after just one season, convinced that he was destined for something far bigger than a late-night sketch show. Carson had initially welcomed Chase onto The Tonight Show during those early SNL years, recognizing his undeniable charisma and comic timing. But as Chase's career evolved, and as his ego expanded to match his fame, Carson's opinion began to shift in a direction that would prove permanent. Johnny watched Chevy very carefully, recalled a talent coordinator who worked on the show during this period. He could see the talent absolutely, but he could also see something else, an arrogance that wasn't earned. Johnny believed you had to pay your dues, work the clubs, sharpen your craft over years. Chevy wanted to skip all of that and go straight to the throne. The real trouble began when Chase launched his own late-night talk show on Fox in 1993. The Chevy Chase show was everything Carson's Tonight Show was not: chaotic, undisciplined, and painfully awkward. Chase mugged for cameras, interrupted guests, and seemed to believe that his personality alone could carry 90 minutes of live television without the meticulous preparation that Carson considered sacred. Carson watched about 15 minutes of the first episode, revealed a writer who worked closely with Carson for many years. He turned it off and said, "He's what happens when ego outruns talent." That was Johnny's final word on Chevy Chase. 6 words, and they contained more truth than any television critic could write in a 1,000-word review. The Chevy Chase show was canceled after just 5 weeks, one of the most spectacular failures in television history. But for Carson, the show's failure wasn't satisfying. It was inevitable. He had seen it coming from the moment Chase had sat across from his desk years earlier, radiating a confidence that had no foundation beneath it. According to a former NBC executive familiar with the situation, Carson's assessment went beyond simple professional criticism. Johnny didn't just think Chevy was untalented, he thought Chevy was disrespectful to the craft itself. The way he winged it, the way he treated preparation as beneath him, the way he assumed audiences would love him just because he was Chevy Chase. Johnny found that attitude personally offensive. While Chase's failed talk show represented the hollow ambition of a performer who mistook fame for ability, Carson's next blacklisted guest would present something far more personal: the slow, painful dissolution of a friendship that had once been the backbone of The Tonight Show's comedy legacy. 4. David Brenner, the favorite son who wore out his welcome. David Brenner held a record that no comedian in television history could match: 158 appearances on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. To put that number in perspective, most successful comedians considered themselves lucky to appear a dozen times over the course of their entire career. Brenner had become so synonymous with the show that insiders referred to him as Carson's unofficial house comedian, the reliable, always entertaining guest who could be counted on to deliver laughs whenever the booking schedule needed a sure thing. Born in Philadelphia in 1936, Brenner had worked his way up through the brutal stand-up circuit of the 1960s before Carson discovered him and fell in love with his sharp, observational style. Their on-screen chemistry was electric. Brenner had a way of making Carson genuinely laugh, not the polite performance laugh that Johnny offered less amusing guests, but the real, uncontrolled laugh that made audiences feel they were witnessing something authentic. David was Johnny's guy, explained a longtime staff member who worked on the show throughout the 1970s. When we needed a guaranteed strong show, we booked Brenner. Johnny lit up when David walked out. You could see the genuine affection between them. But in the entertainment business, too much of a good thing can become a liability. By the early 1980s, Brenner's near-constant presence on the show had begun to generate a subtle but unmistakable fatigue, both among viewers and within Carson's own inner circle. The comedian who had once felt fresh and exciting now felt predictable. "There's a fine line between being a favorite and being furniture," noted a production assistant who worked on the show during this period. David crossed that line so gradually that nobody noticed until it was too late. The audience reaction started cooling, not hostile, just less enthusiastic, and Johnny noticed everything. Carson, who possessed an almost supernatural ability to read audience energy, began spacing out Brenner's appearances. The invitations that had once come every few weeks stretched to every few months, then became increasingly rare. No announcement was made, no confrontation occurred. This was Carson's preferred method of separation, a slow fade rather than a dramatic cut. The situation was made worse by Brenner's growing awareness of what was happening. According to those who knew both men, Brenner took the distancing deeply personally, interpreting it as a betrayal of their friendship rather than a professional calculation. He reportedly made several attempts to address the situation directly with Carson, but Johnny, who avoided personal confrontation with the same determination he brought to everything else, deflected each attempt with vague reassurances that never materialized into actual bookings. It was painful to watch, recalled a floor manager who was present during this period. David would call the office, and you could hear the hope in his voice, and the producers would make excuses, scheduling conflicts, theme nights, whatever. Everyone knew the truth, except David, and eventually even he couldn't deny it anymore. Years later, Carson reportedly told a close friend his assessment of the situation with characteristic bluntness: "I loved David, but 158 times is enough for anyone." The audience moved on, and we had to move with them. It was a pragmatic verdict from a man who understood television's unforgiving mathematics better than anyone alive, but it left a friendship permanently wounded. 5. Gabe Kaplan, the poker player who gambled and lost. Gabe Kaplan was riding one of the biggest waves in 1970s television. As the star of Welcome Back, Kotter, the beloved ABC sitcom about a wisecracking teacher returning to his old Brooklyn high school, Kaplan had become a household name. The show had launched not only his career, but also that of a young unknown named John Travolta, and at its peak, it was one of the most watched programs in America. Kaplan's natural warmth and quick wit made him a natural fit for the talk show circuit, and his early appearances on The Tonight Show had gone well enough to earn him repeat invitations. But Kaplan had a passion that burned far brighter than his love for acting: poker. He wasn't a casual player. He was a serious, dedicated student of the game who spent countless hours studying strategy and competing in high-stakes tournaments. And on one fateful evening on The Tonight Show, that obsession consumed everything else. Gabe sat down and started talking about a poker hand, recalled a sound technician who worked that night, and he just never stopped. Johnny tried to redirect him 2 or 3 times. You could see the little signals, the way Johnny would glance at the camera or shift in his chair. But Gabe was completely lost in this hand. He was describing every card, every bet, every bluff. The audience had no idea what was happening. The segment, which was supposed to be a lively conversation between two entertainers, turned into a one-man lecture on poker strategy that left the studio audience visibly confused and Carson increasingly frustrated. According to those who were present, Carson maintained his professional composure on camera, nodding along and offering polite reactions, but his eyes told a different story entirely. Johnny's smile got very tight, recalled a camera operator who was working that night. There's a difference between his performance smile and his genuine smile, and anyone who worked with him knew the difference immediately. This was the forced smile that meant someone had crossed a line. After the taping, Carson's verdict was swift and characteristic. Johnny walked off stage and said to his producer, "That's not television, it's a lecture hall." "Never again," revealed a makeup artist who overheard the exchange. For Carson, who had spent 3 decades perfecting the art of conversational television, Kaplan's poker monologue represented something unforgivable, a guest who treated The Tonight Show not as a shared performance, but as his own personal stage, with complete disregard for the audience, the host, and the rhythm that made the show work. Kaplan was never formally banned, but the invitations simply stopped arriving. The poker player had gambled with Carson's patience, and the house had won. 6. Jim Stafford, the control freak who tried to direct his own show. Jim Stafford had carved out a unique niche in 1970s entertainment as a comedic musician whose novelty songs, including the hits Spiders and Snakes and My Girl Bill, had made him a popular and frequent guest on variety shows across the television landscape. With his easy Southern charm and genuine musical talent, Stafford seemed like a perfect fit for The Tonight Show, and throughout the mid-1970s, he appeared multiple times to enthusiastic audience response. But Stafford harbored a trait that would prove fatal to his relationship with Carson and his team, an obsessive need to control every aspect of his performance that extended far beyond what any guest had the right to dictate. Most guests show up, do their segment, and trust us to make them look good. That's literally our job, explained a longtime Tonight Show director. Jim Stafford would arrive hours early and start telling our camera operators where to position their cameras. He'd argue with the lighting director about which gels to use. He'd demand specific microphone placements that contradicted our established setups. It was like having a guest director show up uninvited. The Tonight Show operated on a precise, finely tuned machine of technical coordination that had been perfected over decades. Every camera angle, every lighting cue, every audio level was carefully calibrated by professionals who understood exactly how to make the show look and sound its best. Stafford's interference disrupted this system in ways that created genuine problems for the crew. He once held up a taping for 20 minutes arguing about a spotlight, recalled a stagehand who witnessed the incident. 20 minutes? Do you know what 20 minutes costs on a show like this? The entire crew was standing around waiting while this guy lectured our lighting director about color temperature. Johnny was in his office, and when someone told him why we were delayed, he just shook his head and said, "I'd rather interview a cat." Carson's contempt for Stafford's behavior was rooted in something deeper than mere inconvenience. Johnny Carson respected the Tonight Show crew with a loyalty that was legendary in the industry. He knew the names of camera operators, asked after stagehands' families, and treated every member of his team as essential to the show's success. A guest who disrespected that team by overriding their professional expertise was, in Carson's eyes, disrespecting the show itself. The invitations grew less frequent, then stopped altogether. Stafford continued performing in Branson, Missouri, where he could control every spotlight to his heart's content, far from the Burbank studio where his demands had finally exhausted the patience of the most powerful man in television. What Carson's blacklist reveals about Hollywood extends far beyond celebrity gossip. These 6 stories share a common thread. Every person on this list violated one of Carson's core principles. Joan Rivers broke his trust. Frank Sinatra disrespected his family. Chevy Chase insulted his craft. David Brenner tested his patience. Gabe Kaplan hijacked his show, and Jim Stafford disrespected his crew. Johnny had a simple test for every celebrity who sat across from him, recalled his longtime director. How did they treat the pages, the assistants, the guys working the cameras? That told him everything he needed to know about someone's character. In the years since Carson's death in 2005, many of his private judgments have been validated by broader cultural revelations. Time and again, Carson's early assessments proved accurate. The quiet wisdom of a man who spent 30 years watching America's biggest stars reveal who they truly were when they thought no one important was watching. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into television's golden age revealing, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into entertainment history. And if these Tonight Show revelations shocked you, wait until you see our next video exposing the guests who showed up to Carson's show completely intoxicated, and the desperate measures the crew took to keep them upright on live television. Click the bell icon so you don't miss this explosive expose dropping soon.